All right, so today we're going to be um, diving into a whole bunch of information all about compliance.
Okay.
Maybe you're thinking, woo-hoo, compliance. This can be so exciting. Said no one ever, right?
Right.
But what if I told you that this deep dive could actually completely change how you view compliance?
Okay.
Because it's not just about, dodging fines and staying out of trouble.
Right.
It's about how a smart compliance approach can actually become a secret weapon
Mm.
for making your business stronger, more innovative,
Interesting.
and ultimately more successful.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like where this is going.
It's kind of like, those terms of service that we all just blindly click through online?
Uh-huh.
Like, what if those terms of service were actually like a treasure map to unlocking some hidden potential?
I love that.
Right. So what's really fascinating here is that for a long time,
Yeah.
compliance has been seen as this like reactive check the box kind of thing.
Absolutely. A chore. Right.
Yeah.
Something you just have to get through. Gotta do it.
Yeah.
But the source material that we looked at is saying that this mindset is totally outdated.
Mm.
And it could actually be hurting businesses.
So instead of compliance being like the party pooper
Right.
who shows up after the party's already started,
Yes.
it's more like the savvy co-host
Mm-hmm.
who helps to plan the whole thing for the beginning.
100%.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm intrigued,
Yeah.
but I need some convincing here.
Okay.
How can compliance actually help businesses achieve their goals?
Well, one of the key things that the source material talks about is
Yeah.
that compliance needs a bit of a makeover, right?
Yeah.
So it's moving away from this idea of being a cost center,
Mm-hmm.
just a department that seems to drain resources
Right.
towards becoming a strategic partner
Mhm.
that can actually drive business success.
Okay, so are we talking about like compliance magic here or what?
Well, it's not exactly magic, but it can feel like it. The source material really emphasizes that a well-integrated compliance function
Okay.
can almost act like a crystal ball,
Hmm.
So it can actually help organizations to anticipate changes in regulations
Okay.
and then adapt ahead of the curve.
So instead of being reactive, they can kind of see what's coming down the line
Exactly, precisely.
and be prepared for it.
Yeah, so imagine knowing what regulations are coming down the pipeline
Yeah?
and being able to build in solutions to your plans before they even become official.
Hmm.
That's a game changer.
It is a game changer.
Yeah,
Okay, that's a pretty compelling argument.
good.
I'm starting to see how being proactive with compliance could actually give businesses a real advantage.
For sure.
But one thing that the source material also mentioned
Yeah,
is that compliance touches everything in a business,
it does.
from marketing and finance
They're absolute.
to product development.
Uh,
And that just sounds like a logistical nightmare.
yeah.
So how do you actually make sure that compliance
Right.
isn't just ignored
Yep.
in all of the hustle and bustle
Yeah.
of like everyday operations?
That is a really good question.
Yeah.
And that's where things get really interesting because our source lays out some really practical steps.
Okay.
And the first one is collaborating with senior leadership.
Okay.
So compliance officers need to have a seat at the table when big decisions are being made.
Hmm.
Not just relegated to the sidelines.
Yeah.
They should be seen as trusted advisors
Uh,
who can offer insights and guidance, not just enforcers of the rules.
okay, so it's more about building those partnerships
Exactly.
between compliance and other departments
Yes.
rather than just, sending out a memo and being like, hey, follow the rules.
100%. Yeah, it's about embedding compliance
Mhm.
into the very DNA of a company's operations.
Okay, so give me a specific example.
Sure. So the source highlights a great example.
Oh.
Let's say a company is developing a brand new app.
Okay.
Instead of just tacking on data privacy features as an afterthought. Yeah.
The compliance team would be involved from day one,
Okay.
making sure that privacy is built into the design of the app itself.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
So this proactive approach not only reduces risk,
Uh-huh.
but it also builds trust with users.
Yeah. Okay. That example really drives home the point.
Good.
But let's get even more specific.
Okay.
Because the source also mentions tangible benefits
Yes.
of actually aligning compliance with business goals.
Absolutely.
So what are we talking about here?
We're talking about real-world results.
Okay.
Can you think of an example that our listener could really relate to?
Well, let's say
Which one?
I work for a company.
Yeah.
And we get hit with some hefty fines.
Okay.
Our reputation takes a nosedive.
Oh.
because of a series of compliance breaches.
Right.
And we realize we need a major overhaul.
Okay.
So we bring in a new chief compliance officer
All right.
who has a vision for a more proactive and integrated approach.
Okay, so they had a wake-up call.
Yeah. And decided to change their ways.
Exactly.
So what did they actually do differently?
Well, they completely revamped their compliance program.
Okay.
But instead of just focusing on the rules,
Uh-huh.
they decided to really focus on building a culture of compliance
Interesting.
from the ground up.
Okay.
So they invested in technology
Okay.
to streamline some of their compliance processes,
Makes sense.
which actually freed up their team to focus on more strategic initiatives.
Uh-huh.
And they also implemented this really robust training program
Okay.
for all employees,
Nice.
not just the people in the compliance roles.
Right.
And they really emphasized like the why behind the rules, not just the rules themselves.
Yeah. So they went beyond just checking boxes.
Exactly.
And made compliance relevant to everyone in the organization.
Yes, and did it pay off?
Well, the results speak for themselves.
Okay.
They saw a significant decrease in compliance breaches,
Okay.
which of course saved them money,
Yeah.
and it also protected their reputation.
Right.
And then they also regained the trust of regulators and customers,
Yeah.
which is so valuable, especially in that industry.
Especially in financial services. Yeah. Absolutely.
So this case study really highlights the power of integrating compliance strategically.
Okay.
It's not just about avoiding negative outcomes.
Mm.
It's about actually achieving positive ones.
Yeah, and this is where it gets really interesting for you, dear listener.
Okay.
Because imagine if you are part of this financial services company.
Yeah.
And you're in marketing or finance or even product development.
Right.
Understanding how compliance fits in can empower you to make better decisions, to spot potential issues before they blow up,
Absolutely.
and to contribute to building a more ethical and successful organization.
100%.
It's not about just being like, oh, compliance is someone else's job.
Right.
It's everyone's responsibility.
Yeah, and it's not just about following the rules blindly either.
Right.
It's about understanding the bigger picture, the why behind the rules.
And how compliance can actually help you achieve your own professional goals as well.
Okay, so we've seen how compliance can move from being this like dreaded necessity to a valuable asset.
That's true.
But how do you make this shift happen?
That is the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
What are the steps that businesses can take
Yeah.
to actually weave compliance into their strategy and their culture?
Yeah.
Well, that's a great question.
Okay.
And it's something that we're going to be exploring in more detail as we go along.
Okay.
But before we do, I want to emphasize one really key point that our source highlights.
Okay.
Effective compliance is not just about rules. It's about actually building a culture.
So it's more than just ticking boxes.
Exactly.
It's about creating an environment where doing the right thing is just ingrained in everything that the company does.
100%. It's about making compliance part of your company's DNA.
Okay, I like it.
And that's a topic worthy of its own deep dive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Let's keep going.
Okay, so let's get down to like the brass tacks here.
Okay.
We've established that compliance can be like this powerful tool.
Right.
But our listeners probably wondering like,
Yeah.
okay, how do I actually put these ideas into practice?
Right.
Like, let's say I'm not a compliance officer. I'm
Right.
in marketing, product development, or maybe finance.
Yeah.
What's my role in all of this?
Well, the beauty of a truly integrated approach is that it's not just the compliance officer's job.
Yeah.
It's a shared responsibility.
Okay.
And the podcast episode really emphasizes that no matter what your role is,
Yeah.
you can be a champion for compliance.
Okay, so I shouldn't just like sit back and wait for the compliance team to tell me what to do.
No, don't wait for them to come to you.
Okay.
Be proactive.
Okay.
Reach out to your compliance team.
Okay.
Build a relationship with them.
Okay.
Let them know what projects you're working on.
Uh-huh.
Involve them right from the get-go.
Okay, so it's like inviting a navigator on board. Before you set sail, you know,
Exactly.
you don't want to be like halfway across the ocean and realize you're headed for some rocky shores.
100%. Yeah, it's a great analogy.
And the compliance team's not there to just be like, no, you can't do that all the time. Right.
Right, exactly.
They're there to help you find solutions
Yes.
that will help you achieve your goals while staying on the right side of the law.
Exactly.
Okay, so they're kind of like compliance ninjas,
I like it.
helping us navigate this regulatory maze
Yes.
and emerge victorious.
I love it.
But okay,
Yeah.
I've built that relationship with my compliance team.
Okay.
I'm keeping them in the loop. What are some like practical everyday things that I can do
Yeah.
to actually like integrate their insights into my work?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the podcast episode has some really concrete advice here.
Okay.
The first thing is
Yeah.
make sure you have a good grasp of the compliance policies
Okay.
and procedures that are relevant to your area. Don't just like skim through them. Really take the time to understand how they apply to your specific work.
So I'm doing my homework.
Yes.
I'm boning up on the rules.
Exactly.
Well,
All right, so then you want to think critically about your work
okay.
through a compliance lens.
Okay.
What are the potential risks? What are the potential opportunities that could go wrong?
Yeah.
But also, where are the chances to do things better, more ethically, or maybe even in a way that gives your company a competitive advantage?
So it's like a risk-benefit analysis, but with like a compliance twist.
Precisely.
Okay.
Once you've identified those risks and those opportunities,
Yeah.
have an open conversation with your compliance team.
Okay.
Get their input on how to mitigate those risks
Oh.
and how to maximize the opportunity.
Okay. So it really sounds like it's all about open communication
Yes.
and collaboration.
100%.
Okay. But I'm curious,
Yeah.
how do we scale this up from like the individual level to the entire organization?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
How do we cultivate this culture of compliance
Yeah.
that kind of permeates every department, every decision?
Yeah.
And that's where leadership comes in.
Okay.
The source material really stresses that the tone needs to be set from the top. Senior leaders need to demonstrate
Okay.
through their actions and their words
Yeah.
that compliance is not just some bureaucratic requirement,
Right.
but it's a core value of the company.
Okay. So it's not enough to just have a compliance department
Right.
like tucked away in a corner somewhere.
Exactly.
Compliance needs to be woven into the fabric of the company's culture.
100%. And that means leading by example.
Okay.
So leaders need to model ethical behavior. They need to hold themselves and others accountable for compliance. And they need to recognize and reward those who are true compliance champions.
So it's about creating an environment where doing the right thing is not just expected.
Yes.
It's celebrated.
Absolutely.
Okay. But how do you measure the success of all of these efforts?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
How do you know if you're actually building a strong compliance culture? Well, the podcast episode points to several metrics that compliance officers can use
Okay.
to track their progress.
Okay.
And one key metric is the number of compliance incidents.
Okay.
So are you seeing a decrease in violations, breaches, and other compliance-related issues?
So you're not just, you're measuring whether your efforts are actually making like a tangible difference.
Exactly.
But I'm guessing it goes beyond just like counting incidents, right?
Yeah. It also involves assessing employee awareness
Okay.
and understanding of compliance policies.
Okay.
So are they able to not just recite the rules, but actually demonstrate that they understand them
Okay.
and they know how to apply them to their work?
So it's not just checking boxes.
Right.
It's checking for like real comprehension.
Exactly.
And I imagine that the effectiveness of your compliance training programs plays a big role in this.
It plays a huge role, yeah.
Right.
No one wants to sit through like a dry, generic compliance training.
Right.
Right.
It's got to be more than just a snooze fest.
Exactly. The episode emphasizes that training needs to be engaging. It needs to be informative.
Yeah.
And it needs to be relevant to employees' roles.
It's got to be more than just like, here's a bunch of rules, memorize them.
Right, exactly.
You want to equip people with the knowledge and skills that they need
Yes.
to actually make good decisions
Yes.
in those real-world situations.
100%.
Okay, but at the end of the day,
Yeah.
I think a lot of business leaders want to know, like,
Yeah.
what's the bottom line here? What's the return on investment
We are
for all of this compliance effort?
Exactly. That's where this concept of the ROI of compliance comes in.
Okay.
So are you seeing tangible benefits? Like reduced costs, improved efficiency, or even like a stronger brand reputation as a result of your compliance efforts?
So you're demonstrating that compliance is a valuable investment,
Yes.
not just an expense.
Exactly.
But I think our listener might be thinking, okay, well, how do I measure something like brand reputation?
That's a great question. And it is tricky to quantify,
Yeah.
but there are ways to track things like customer sentiment,
Okay.
media coverage, even employee morale.
Interesting.
Which can all be indicators of your company's reputation.
So you're looking at a variety of data points.
Yes.
To get this holistic picture
exactly.
of how compliance is impacting the business.
Uh-huh.
And I imagine that those metrics can be really powerful when you're trying to make the case for compliance.
Absolutely.
To senior leadership.
For sure. When you can demonstrate that compliance is not a cost center,
right,
but it's actually a profit driver,
yeah,
it becomes a much easier sell.
Yeah. Okay, so we focused a lot on the how of compliance integration. But before we move on,
Okay.
I think it's important to address the why.
Yes.
Why should our listener care about this?
That's an excellent point.
Yeah.
What's in it for them personally?
Yeah.
And I think the answer is pretty simple. It's
Yeah.
about protecting yourself,
Okay.
your career, and your company.
Hmm.
In today's world, increasingly complex,
Yeah.
highly regulated business world,
Yeah.
compliance is not optional anymore.
Right.
It's a necessity.
It's not just about doing the right thing.
Right.
It's also about doing the smart thing for your own career.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And it's not just about avoiding negative consequences,
Okay.
like fines and lawsuits.
Yeah.
It's about actually building a sustainable,
Yeah.
successful business that operates with integrity.
Right.
And earns the trust of its customers,
Yeah.
employees, and stakeholders.
So it's about creating like a win-win situation for everyone involved.
Exactly.
But I imagine some of our listeners might be feeling a little overwhelmed at this point.
Understandably.
Right.
Yeah.
Compliance can seem like this really daunting topic.
It can.
It's especially when you consider all of the different regulations and nuances involved.
Absolutely.
So what advice would you give to someone who's just starting to explore this and trying to make sense of it all?
I would say, first and foremost, don't panic.
Okay.
Compliance can seem complicated,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to be.
Okay.
Start by focusing on the fundamentals.
Okay, so what are the fundamentals?
Well, the podcast episode outlines a few key steps.
Okay.
First, do your research.
Okay.
Take the time to understand the regulatory landscape for your industry and your specific business.
So you're educating yourself.
Yes.
You're becoming familiar with the rules of the game.
Exactly. And once you have like a basic understanding
Yeah.
of the regulatory requirements,
Okay.
the next step is to assess your company's current compliance posture.
Interesting.
So where are you doing well?
Okay.
And where are there areas for improvement?
So it's like taking inventory of your compliance strengths and weaknesses.
Exactly. And this is where collaboration is key.
Okay.
Don't try to do it all yourself. Talk to your compliance team.
Yeah.
Involve your colleagues.
Okay.
Get input from different departments.
So it really is a team effort.
It really is. Compliance is a team sport.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
But what about the practical aspects of actually implementing this?
Yeah.
Like, where do you even start when it comes to putting these ideas into action?
Well, the podcast episode offers some really practical advice here as well.
Okay.
One suggestion is to start small.
Okay.
Focus on one area at a time.
Okay.
You don't have to overhaul your entire compliance program overnight.
You don't have to boil the ocean.
Exactly. Choose one area where you can make a meaningful improvement. Focus your efforts there.
So it's like taking a bite-sized approach rather than trying to swallow the whole elephant at once.
Exactly. I love that.
Okay, so what are some examples of areas where companies could focus their initial efforts?
Well, one really common area is data privacy.
Okay.
With data breaches becoming increasingly frequent and increasingly costly, it's more important than ever to make sure that you're handling sensitive information responsibly.
Yeah, data privacy is definitely top of mind for a lot of businesses these days.
Absolutely.
So what are some practical steps that companies can take to improve their data privacy practices?
Well, the podcast episode highlights a few key strategies.
Okay.
First, conduct a thorough data inventory.
Yep.
So identify what kind of data you're collecting, where it's stored, and who has access to it.
So you need to know what data you have.
Yes.
And where it lives.
Exactly.
That seems like a logical first step.
It is. And once you have a clear understanding of your data landscape, then you can start implementing appropriate security measures for actually protect that data.
Okay.
And that might include things like encryption, access controls, regular security audits.
So you're putting those safeguards in place to prevent unauthorized access.
Exactly.
Or disclosure.
100%.
But it's also crucial to have clear policies and procedures in place for handling data breaches, right?
Right. So if a breach does occur,
you
need to be prepared to respond quickly.
Okay.
effectively.
Yeah.
Minimize the damage.
So it's not just about preventing the breaches, but also having a plan in place for when they happen.
Exactly, because no system is foolproof.
Right.
And data breaches are, unfortunately, a reality.
Yeah, they are.
In today's world.
Yeah.
But by taking that proactive approach to data privacy, you can significantly reduce your risk and protect your company and your customers.
That is valuable advice.
Good.
But data privacy is just one piece of this whole compliance puzzle.
Yes.
So what are some other areas where companies might want to focus their attention?
Another really common area is anti-bribery and corruption compliance.
Okay.
And this is especially important for companies that operate in global markets.
Okay.
Where bribery and corruption may be more prevalent.
So it's about making sure that your business practices are ethical.
Yes.
And that they comply with the laws of all the countries that you're operating in.
100%.
But how do you actually implement an effective anti-bribery program?
Yeah, it can be challenging.
Yeah.
But there are proven strategies that can help.
Okay.
The podcast episode suggests several key elements
of
an effective anti-bribery program.
Okay.
First, you need a clear and comprehensive anti-bribery policy that outlines your company's stance on bribery and corruption and provides guidance on how to avoid those practices.
So it's setting the tone from the top?
Yes.
And establishing those clear expectations?
Yes.
For ethical conduct?
Yes. And in addition to having a strong policy, it's also crucial to provide regular training to employees on anti-bribery compliance.
Okay.
This training should cover things like recognizing red flags, reporting suspicious activity, understanding the consequences of engaging in bribery or corruption.
So you're empowering employees to identify and report potential issues.
Exactly.
Okay. And it's also essential
to
establish like really robust due diligence procedures for third parties.
100%, yeah.
Right.
Like agents, distributors, suppliers.
Yeah, because those third parties can often pose a significant risk.
They can, yeah.
Right.
So it's crucial to carefully vet them and monitor their activities.
So you're extending your compliance efforts beyond the walls of your company.
Yes.
To make sure that your business partners are also operating ethically.
Exactly. And then finally, it's important to have a system in place for reporting and investigating potential violations. This might include a confidential hotline, an online reporting mechanism, as well as a clear process for investigating and addressing any reported issues.
So you're creating that culture of accountability.
Yes.
And transparency.
Absolutely.
Okay, so by implementing all these key elements, companies can build a strong anti-bribery program.
Yes.
That helps them mitigate risk. Protect their reputation.
Absolutely.
And operate with integrity.
100%.
This is all incredibly valuable advice.
Good.
But before we wrap up this section, I want to address a concern that I think our listener might be having. All this talk about compliance can sometimes feel a bit restrictive.
I understand that.
Right. Yeah. Some people might worry that if you're too focused on all the rules and regulations, it will stifle innovation and creativity.
That's a really good point.
Right.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's a really important point.
Okay.
And it's a concern that I hear pretty often. But I actually think it's based on a misconception about compliance. Compliance isn't about stifling innovation. It's about enabling it.
That's an interesting perspective. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So when you have a strong compliance framework in place, it provides this foundation of trust and stability that allows for greater innovation and creativity to actually flourish.
So it's like having guardrails in place.
Yes.
So you can actually drive faster.
Exactly.
Without fear of going off the road.
100%, yeah.
Okay.
Compliance provides the structure and the boundaries that allow businesses to take risks, explore new ideas, without putting themselves at undue risk.
So instead of seeing compliance as a barrier to innovation, we should be viewing it as a catalyst for like responsible and sustainable growth.
Precisely. Compliance is not about saying no to everything. It's about finding ways to say yes while still managing risk effectively.
Okay. This has been incredibly insightful. We've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
From like the shifting landscape of compliance to practical strategies for actually integrating it into business strategy and culture.
Absolutely.
But I think our listener might be eager to hear about some real-world examples of companies that have successfully done this.
For sure.
Right.
Like integrated compliance into their strategy and their culture.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Okay.
Let's delve into some case studies and explore how these companies have turned compliance into a competitive advantage.
Let's do it. All right, I'm ready for some inspiration.
Okay.
Give me a case study from the podcast episode
Okay.
that shows how a company successfully took compliance and wove it into their DNA.
Okay, well, there's this really interesting one about a tech company that was rapidly expanding into new international markets.
Yeah.
Okay. And, they quickly realized that each country has its own, tangled web of regulations, and navigating all those differences was going to be a major hurdle for them.
So they couldn't just use a one-size-fits-all approach?
No, they had to adapt to each new market they entered.
Okay. And so how did they handle that?
Well, instead of trying to figure it out as they went along, which, could have led to some pretty costly mistakes.
Right, yeah.
They decided to make compliance a core part of their global expansion strategy from the very beginning.
So they were proactive and strategic about compliance.
Yes.
Instead of reactive.
Exactly.
Okay, I like it.
So what they did was they established a dedicated global compliance team with experts in all the different regions they were targeting.
Makes sense.
And this team developed really robust policies and procedures that were tailored to each market.
Oh.
And they invested heavily in training their employees on those specific regulations that they needed to know.
So they built a really strong foundation of compliance expertise.
Yes.
And made sure that all their employees were equipped to navigate the complexities of all these different regulatory environments.
Yeah, and it paid off.
Okay, how so?
Well, by integrating compliance into their expansion strategy, they were able to avoid those costly missteps.
Okay.
Build trust with regulators in each market, and really position themselves as a responsible and reliable player on the global stage.
So this proactive approach not only helped them mitigate risk, it actually enhanced their brand reputation.
Absolutely.
And gave them a competitive advantage.
Yes, compliance became a driver of growth.
That's amazing.
Instead of a barrier.
Yeah, but I'm sure it wasn't always smooth sailing.
Of course not. They faced some challenges.
Like what?
One of the biggest ones was resistance to change within the organization.
That's understandable.
Some employees saw compliance as just like another layer of bureaucracy that was going to slow things down.
I get it. Change can be tough.
It can be. So how did the company overcome this?
Yeah.
Well, they really focused on communication and education.
Okay.
So they made a really big effort to explain the why behind all these compliance initiatives.
So not just here are the rules, follow them.
No, they helped employees understand how these efforts were going to benefit the company, but also their individual roles and their own career prospects.
So they connected compliance to things that people actually cared about.
Yes, like job security and professional growth.
Okay, smart.
Yeah, they also made sure to celebrate successes.
Okay.
And recognize those employees who really went above and beyond to champion compliance.
So they were creating a more positive and engaged culture.
Exactly.
Around compliance.
Yeah.
It's like you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar.
I like that. That's a good one.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've talked a lot about what companies can do to integrate compliance effectively.
Right.
But are there any potential pitfalls that companies should be aware of?
Yeah, what are some things that can go wrong?
Okay, well, one common pitfall is getting so focused on the rules and regulations that you kind of lose sight of the bigger picture.
Okay.
Right.
So it shouldn't just be about blindly following rules just for the sake of following rules.
Exactly. It's about understanding the spirit and the intent behind those rules.
Okay.
And applying them in a way that makes sense for your specific business.
So it's about finding that balance between adhering to the letter of the law and embracing the spirit of ethical conduct.
Absolutely. Another potential pitfall is creating a culture of fear around compliance. So if employees are afraid to speak up or ask questions for fear of getting in trouble, that's not good.
Right.
It can stifle innovation, create a toxic work environment.
So you want to make sure that you're encouraging open communication.
Yes. A healthy compliance culture should encourage transparency, not silence and fear.
Absolutely.
And then finally, it's important to remember that compliance is not static.
Oh, right.
It's constantly evolving.
Right.
New laws are introduced, existing ones are updated.
Yeah, the landscape's always changing.
It is, so companies need to stay on top of these changes and adapt their programs accordingly.
So it's a journey, not a destination.
I love that. That's a perfect way to put it.
Right.
Yeah.
Compliance is an ongoing process of learning, adapting, and improving.
Absolutely.
Okay, this has been a really great conversation.
It has.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
But before we wrap up,
I
want to pose one final question to our listener.
All right, I like it.
Now that you've heard all about how compliance can be this powerful driver of success, what one action will you take in your own role, no matter what it is, to champion a culture of compliance?
That's a great question.
Will you reach out to your compliance team?
Yeah.
Start a conversation. Will you take the time to actually educate yourself on the regulations in your area? Will you look for opportunities to integrate those compliance considerations into your day-to-day work?
It doesn't have to be a big thing. Every action, no matter how small, contributes to building a stronger, more ethical workplace.
And as we've learned today, a strong compliance culture is not just good for business.
Right.
It's good for everyone.
It is.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of compliance.
Absolutely.
And until next time, keep diving deeper.
Keep learning.